Hi, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Rosa and Rubini podcast, Making Sense of This World. As always, my name is Manas Chavla, and I'm joined by CEO and Head of Research, Brunello Rosa. And this week is quite the week in British politics and in British economic markets. Everyone talks about the quick sort of turnover of prime ministers, and that's really kind of ceasing to be a thing. We are now at our third prime minister in 2 months, Rishi Sunak. Which was largely materialized by quite the economic fiasco that Liz Truss had caused that we've discussed in previous weeks, but are going to revisit today and talk about the future that lies ahead. But to start off with a bit of a bird's eye view, Brunello, what exactly happened with Liz Truss? What was this economic debacle all about?
Yeah, I mean, we have discussed this in several past occasions, but then this saga came to kind of a sudden conclusion. You might remember that a mini budget was launched by Kwasi Kwarteng and, of course, was backed by Prime Minister Truss. And that mini budget foresaw 45 billions of unfunded tax cuts, which were added to the 100 billions of support for families, households during this energy crisis. Clearly was not welcomed by the market. It massively backfired, and first Kwarteng and then Truss had to kind of stage a dramatic U-turn until when Truss understood that that wasn't enough. She had to sack Kwarteng in an extreme attempt of saving a job. But of course, also that was not enough for the market, because Jeremy Hunt was appointed as successor of Kwarteng as Chancellor, clearly came about with a totally different plan. And when your Chancellor totally puts you in the spot and shows that it doesn't agree with almost anything you've said as Prime Minister, your position of Prime Minister is massively weakened. So it became an untenable position, the one of Liz Truss, and eventually she had to resign as leader of the Tory party and then eventually as Prime Minister.
Certainly. And, in very quick succession after that, we had quite the, leadership election or lack thereof, where, up for grabs was Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson. There's rumors of Boris Johnson possibly returning, and even Penny Mordaunt. And the latter two effectively pulled out of the race before anything substantive happened, making Rishi Sunak prime minister by default. Rishi obviously has been, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, has been junior minister, and has only very recently, for about the last 7 years or so, have been MP. But he's staked almost his entire plan on reforming the British economy, on catering to the cost of living crisis. What's his plan? How is he going to do that?
Yeah, as you said, he was elected almost by default, but in effect, that was also by design. When they announced that the new leader would be elected by the 28th of October, we could kind of understand that he wouldn't go to the more general membership base. And I think this is a good thing, because if we had gone to the membership base and Boris Johnson had run, he would have won again, because clearly he's more popular than anybody else within the party. Then whether that would have been a good choice for the country is yet to be seen. By remaining a parliamentary base, that meant that the most competent person was appointed, was chosen, and that's clearly Rishi Sunak. Now, what are his plans? Well, we know from what he campaigned, the first race he ran, and then for what he did when he was in office as Chancellor. And we remember that it was actually his resignation that triggered the fall of Boris Johnson's government. Well, his plan is fiscal prudence, to some extent consolidation down the line. There were increases in the national insurance contributions. There was an increase in the corporate tax rate from 19 to 25%. There was a maintenance of the current tax brackets for personal taxes. In particular, never foresaw the abolition of the 45% P, the 45% tax brackets for the for incomes above 150K. So clearly, is a much more prudent approach to public finances than what was devised by Kwarteng and Liz Truss. Additionally, as we said, the market really likes the fact that he was already a chancellor and a successful one, because during the pandemic, in fact, he opened the purse strings, which is a good thing, and also promised to make the UK a more competitive economy. The fact that he's also been part of the city, he worked briefly at Goldman Sachs and other financial institutions, the fact that he's married to one of the daughters of one of the richest men in India. These are all elements that make him really liked by the city. The real challenge for him would be to connect with the middle class and the working class, which is a theme that will become important as we approach the general election that eventually will happen in 2024.
Certainly. And I mean, you know, on the sort of economic front, we're talking about previously, as we have many times, the competing demands of monetary and fiscal policy, especially in the United Kingdom. And I saw in your views that you mentioned something called the financial instability hypothesis, and how this could possibly be a major risk in the next sort of oncoming weeks and months. Could you tell me a bit more about what that means and what that might involve?
Sure. So, as we said, with rampant inflation, central banks had to increase interest rates, but in doing so, they weaken the economy, but also they make certain positions that have been established in the past unsustainable. Those positions that Hyman Minsky calls speculative or ultra speculative or Ponzi finance. Bear in mind, Ponzi finance often associated with some sort of scheme, pyramid, call it as you want, something illegal, dodge and so on. But in Minsky's approach, Ponzi finance is a perfectly legal position. It's just exposed, extremely exposed to higher interest rates. Just to make an example, a project to finance a nuclear plant is Ponzi finance, because it would only pay off at the very end of the period, maybe 10 to 20 years after being initiated. And you understand, when you bet so highly on the fact that this project eventually pays off, you're in such a risky position, because in these 10 to 20 years in which the plant is built, anything can happen, including a massive increase in interest rates and so on. So some of those positions may become unsustainable. That's the theory. And so all positions when interest rates become more and more risky, and the riskiest one already is going into default, thus triggering a financial instability event. That's kind of the theory. And this is exactly where we are with the central banks increasing interest rates so much. The risk is that some of those more speculative positions would eventually default. And that could be a default on corporate debt, especially the high yields. But in some cases, in case of highly indebted countries, could be even sovereign debt. And if the recession is accompanied by a debt crisis, what Nouri Rubini calls a stagflationary debt crisis, the recession, instead of being short and shallow, might be actually rather prolonged and deep, which clearly doesn't help. And central banks are, of course, scared or partly causing this recession by increasing interest rates, something that they have to do to control inflation. So it's a bit of a conundrum where they find themselves in. They have a competing demand from price stability and financial stability within monetary policy. And then there's the kind of the potential conflict between fiscal policy and monetary policy. So you see how inconsistent these policies might be and how difficult policymaking is in this period.
Right. to some degree, I mean, I think there might, be somewhat of a silver lining to this entire saga. It's sort of occurring to me that, maybe this should reassure us that there's some level of market discipline that still works. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would say perhaps is the key lesson we can learn from this entire saga. I mean, how do you know that you're going the wrong direction when you adopt policies, whether it's monetary or fiscal, and within monetary, whether it is interest rates or asset purchases? Well, the market tells you whether they like it or not. Now, policymakers don't need to become slave of what the market thinks. Sometimes they just need to do the right thing. But the market is conceived as collective intelligence, as collective common sense, is a very good indication if something is not going in the right direction. We saw that with Liz Truss. There were already lots of commentaries before she started that she would be the shortest serving prime minister because of all the policies she was kind of foreseeing, including, for example, the revisitation of the Northern Ireland Protocol, something that was clearly outrageous in this period. And conversely, we saw in Italy with the election of Giorgia Meloni, which is still an unknown quantity, but the market is giving the benefit of doubt because the first steps of Meloni as prime ministers have been extremely cautious, nothing outside the boundaries that have been set by Mario Draghi. So as long as she remains in those boundaries, the market will be happy and nothing will happen. But as soon as she goes outside the boundaries, she starts saying something that doesn't make sense. She starts foreseeing plans, economic plans that don't adapt. You can be sure that the market will signal the fact that it's going in the wrong direction. So the fact that market discipline is still there is a good thing. If anything, market discipline has been put aside for way too long by central bank injections of liquidity in the last 10 to 15 years, which were a drag for everybody, but also for politicians that kind of got rid of the key responsibility, which is being prudent and managing prudently the country that they lead. So I think that's the key lesson that we can learn from all these episodes.
Yeah. It occurs to me when we think about something like 2007 and 8, we were so sort of, shocked by the economic crisis, but what gave us sort of, small semblance of reassurance was the politics. And now I think it really is a sign of the times that it's a bit of the opposite. We're so shocked by the politics that it's actually the markets that give us a little bit of reassurance, ironically enough.
Yes. Ironic, I would say, yes.
Ironically as well. But no, as always, Brunello, thank you so much for your thoughts and insights.
Thank you very much. Until next time.